The Last Hour by Jim Daly. It was the last hour of John Kyle's late duty in the automatic telephone exchange. The hour when the wheel of time slows down. The hour when low sounds are amplified. The hour when spirits stir in every deep shadow. He was seated in front of the new Super 10 digital switchboard, and as if to make him aware of the passing of each second, tiny red rectangles on its front pulsed on and off and beat to time incessantly. 11 p.m. and no one had called the switchboard for some time, and he had been alone since 5 that afternoon. He stood up from the switchboard, stretched and walked to a window which he opened, to see if anybody in the outside world stirred. He saw an old woman pass under a streetlight. She was bent with the weight of her years, dressed in a long black coat and sad red woolen hat. She battled against the wind, carrying a bulging bag, maybe toys for her grandchildren. When she disappeared into the night, he looked at the tall spire of Christ Church Cathedral, whose tip seemed lost in the infinite darkness. An updraft of cold wind caught him full in the face. He closed the window and walked back to the switchboard, but soon became restless. He decided to walk down the centre aisle of the exchange. On either side of the aisle there were suites of electromechanical equipment, 10 feet high, 2.5 feet apart, and spaced like church pews. They covered the entire floor of the building. All soon to be dismantled, he thought, for our new saviour, digital technology. As he walked, he looked at the strips of parquet flooring between the suites, as if he might find someone, but knew his workmates were in bed or in front of televisions or sitting on high stools at some bar. At that moment, many conversations passed through the telephone exchange, down the lines with soft murmurs and long silences, for John knew this was also the hour for lovers. He returned to the switchboard and wondered if there was anybody he could ring. Nobody came to mind. As he sat, he thought of his home village at the foot of the Cumra Mountains and of his mother. He wished she had a phone, but through the pangs of loneliness, he knew he would see her the following day for dinner. As always, during the last hour, he felt there was a presence in the exchange, a ghostly presence which watched him. Maybe a technician who had crossed over, looking down on his monument on this earth before it was to be taken away. John decided to make his rounds through the building. He left the exchange floor by the back stairs and walked about the deserted corridors, checking the locked doors of the cable chamber, transmission room, retiring room, telex exchange, and back to the switchboard again. A little later, the sounds of the exchange, the clicking of the relays, the hum of the air conditioning system, and the high-pitched whistle from the transmission equipment became more persistent for his attention. But suddenly, through it all, he heard a strange sound, a whine like a baby's cry. He tried to dismiss it to himself by thinking it came from the outside, but in his heart he knew it came from somewhere down the floor amongst the suites of equipment. It was a cry of pain that rose in volume, then fell and rose again like the cry of the wind. The skin tightened on his face and the small hairs rose on the back of his neck. Christ, what's that? A baby, he thought. He wished to go to the child, and almost at once he wished to run away from it. Involuntarily, he began to walk towards the sound, and he was aware of nothing then outside the movement of his feet and a baby's cry. He walked down the centre aisle and stopped beside the first group selector's suite. The sound grew intense, and he knew its source was near. As he walked between the suites, the cry seemed to come from somewhere above his head. He looked up at the expeller vent and saw its propeller jammed. He switched off the power to it, and the cry stopped. Back in his bedsit, as he sipped a cup of tea and warmed himself at a 2-bar electric fire. John heard the wind howl outside, and he knew it blew more wildly in the Cumra Mountains, free from the traps of air vents. He looked at his watch. It was Christmas Day.